is because inflation is this compounding invisible effect that keeps getting worse. When people say, well, inflation's only 2%, it's only 3%. Yeah, it's 3% plus every other year before that. Bitcoin has been between 80,000 and 120,000 for, like you said, maybe like the better part of a year now, right? So it is almost like that flat market. Again, it's not flat, it's flat in Bitcoin terms. But the people who are actually educating, who understand what Bitcoin is, who see the bigger picture, we're all still here. We're all saying the same stuff. We're still stacking every single day. These things don't happen in short order. Even though you see them online, you're seeing it on the news, they're talking about it. These things take multiple decades. And even where we're at right now, right, I would say maybe 10 to 15 years, we see some actual substantial transitions and changes in power. These AI agents are going to be transacting with each other using Bitcoin. People cannot see what they can't imagine.
Hi, GenZBTC. How are you doing? Everything fine on your end?
Yeah, dude, I'm doing good. What's up, everybody? Good morning to everyone. Over here in my side of the world, it's 2 a.m. All right, I woke up for 2 a.m. for Mr. Robin Seyr. And that's what you got to do when you want to talk to the big dogs in the Bitcoin space.
I appreciate that a lot. Thank you so much. It's also almost still morning for me, but like a very late morning, like it's 11 in the morning. So, but I really appreciate you coming on the show and making it possible. You also, I think, I just scrolled through your YouTube feed, like what kind of the topics you touched on, and you will be later on, like very early also into work. So like, you go into work like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. What is the time? Like very early on.
Yeah, I go to work at 5 a.m., but I got to get up, at 4 so I can leave at like 4:30, so right after this, I'm going to work, so this is my real job right here. Bitcoin is my real job. And then I go to my fiat job after this.
You made a video. I haven't seen it. I only saw the thumbnail where you said like you are integrating what you do in the fiat job, but a little bit with Bitcoin. Is like what are you doing there?
So I'm a logistics provider, right? I'm a logistics broker. So anytime people need stuff moved, I'm here to move it. And as a salesperson, right, I basically have my own business, so I can run it how I want to. So I decided when it was time for me to start selling, I was going to target Bitcoin mining companies. I was going to target Bitcoin ATM companies. I was going to target energy infrastructure companies, right? Because these guys need someone to move their Bitcoin miners. They have to move the transformers when they're building out all these new facilities, whether it's in the US or overseas. Someone's got to move some of the containers that come in from a ship. So that's really where I decided to target. So some of my biggest customers are HUD 8, Compass Mining, right? CleanSpark. This is one company, Rocket Coin, they're a Bitcoin ATM company. I got to move like 35 ATMs out of the state of Iowa into the state of Texas, because Texas is a big Bitcoin hub. And it's just been super cool to meet all these different people. I get to talk to them about Bitcoin. Some of them got into Bitcoin through their jobs, right? So instead of me getting a Bitcoin job per se, right? Like working at Swan or working at River or working at Strategy, I've decided to turn my current job into a Bitcoin job as much as possible, right? Like I have companies like construction companies that have nothing to do with Bitcoin, and I just work with them. It's fine. But wherever I can, I want to try to align myself with things that assist the Bitcoin network in growing and that are adjacent to Bitcoin in whatever way I can. So it's been really fun.
That's freaking awesome. And then it's like almost slowly becoming a Bitcoin company if you work mostly for Bitcoiners.
Yeah, no, for sure. Eventually some of my Bitcoin customers will start paying me in Bitcoin, right? And then that's when I start giving them the discount. Anyone who's paying in Bitcoin gets a discount. We can talk about that more a little bit later. But yeah, that's super cool. Super appreciative of the freedom that my job gives me as like a salesperson with their own book of business. I can just target the type of people that I want to talk to, right? And again, there's a lot of money to be made in the Bitcoin mining space, of course. And also when it comes to the facilities these guys build out, 100,000 square feet, they need transformers, they need power generators, right? They need all this steel, all these different rackings, right? All this different stuff. And that's a lot of shipments for me. So I really, the Bitcoin mining guys are the big dogs. That and the repair guys, because the repair facilities like M3, like Compass Mining, they have customers like Hut 8. They have customers like TeraWolf, who are repairing thousands of units at one time. So that's multiple pallets that are very expensive, right? That need to be sent off to a repair site and then sent back. So you always get like 2 shipments out of it. So repair facilities are also really, really amazing.
Yeah, I mine currently with simple mining, and whenever my machine or something like that breaks, I always get those message of like, oh, your miner is currently in the transit of like the repair shop, and like it gets back, and it's freaking awesome. So
That's me.
I get that.
That's all me. That's all me, bro.
I love that. That's really I wasn't aware of that at all.
Yeah, no, I don't know how you know what, actually, we're going to do this. We're going to talk about how I got into my fiat job, right? So this is my job story arc. I'm going to explain this on my channel in a separate video as well. But, I've never really made a lot of money at work. Like all my jobs, I worked at like Target, I worked at Walmart. But when I did work at these like big box retail places, um, speaking of which, do they have Target over there? Where you live? I know they probably
No.
have maybe.
I've been to a Target, but this was in Miami, so
Yeah.
so I've never seen a Target in my whole life in Austria. But Target is such a huge brand, so we see it in like movies and films and series. And actually, when I was in Miami, one of the first things on my girlfriend's to-do list was, let's go to a Target.
No, that's pretty good. It makes sense. Like, the we can dive into more in a second, but I worked at Target, I worked at Walmart, and when I did is I worked in the back. I did fulfillment, right? You know, I was the one doing orders, right? So if you order something online, I would pack it up in a box, put it on a pallet, and then put it on the truck. Then I worked in a warehouse. It was a car warehouse where we would do a lot of repair parts. We would do a lot of LTL, which stands for less than truckload. So sometimes you would fill up half the truck would leave, and then it would go somewhere else to fill up the other half of itself. You know what I mean? And I just did a lot of that. And now I'm on the side of, you know, sending the trucks out, giving the trucks their routes, how much the trucks need to get paid, talking to the drivers, right? Whereas before I was the one filling the truck up. And, it's way different because the amount of money that you can make, and scale outward by being the person who's booking shipments for multiple different companies at one time, it just gives you so much more flexibility, gives you more leverage, gives you more experience in the industry. You learn a lot more. Because before I was so limited, I can only load one truck for one company at one time if I work in a warehouse. But when you're the salesperson, you could work for every single warehouse on the block and you can do every single truck for them at one time. Right. So I just happened to end up on this side of the industry because of the fact that all I did previously was load the trucks up. So I had a lot of experience in online fulfillment and order fulfillment and just with trucking in general. I didn't realize it at the time that this was even like an option for me. But I'm glad I figured it out. And now I can kind of turn it into a Bitcoin job, right? It's really hard to turn your job into a Bitcoin job when you're just working in a warehouse. Right. You know, there's not a lot of impact that you can have. There's not a lot of different things that you can do. But I was still trying in my own like special way. We had a whiteboard that we would write on every day in the morning at my warehouse, just like what the objectives were and like what everyone was going to be doing for the day. And I was closing the warehouse every single day, and I would erase the whiteboard at the end of the day. And in the morning, when people came in, they would see my message And I would always say things like, study Bitcoin, 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin, anything under $100,000 for 1 Bitcoin is cheap. This is when the price was around 40,000, you know what I mean? And, it seemed crazy at the time, but I've been the Bitcoin guy for a while now, right? And, nothing changed. Nothing's changed. It just makes more sense now. It doesn't really, right? It's always made the same amount of sense, but the proof is more in people's faces now. There's more adoption. The price action, is more, it's less volatile, and it's more to the upside, right? There's different things that are happening in the Bitcoin space. The space is maturing. And I think people are starting to understand exactly a little bit more what's going on. They're more open to understanding what's going on.
Yeah, Bitcoin is no longer as crazy as it once was. People are kind of seeing what's going on, and if you bring now Bitcoin up, it's no longer the crazy reaction of like, oh, what is Bitcoin? And it's more like a normal, like, oh, okay, you're into Bitcoin. At least this is kind of what I saw from like coming from 2020 towards now. 2020, the reactions were a lot more crazy than it is currently.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's been more normalized, and the more it gets talked about, the more that it continues to not go away. The more it just kind of enters the mainstream. It enters the majority dialogue. And again, the higher the price goes, the more people tend to care. Of course, the price is not the real driving force of Bitcoin's value. That's just the fiat denomination. But at the end of the day, it is a way that Bitcoin advertises itself. Right? When Bitcoin goes to 200,000, it will be advertising itself to an entire new group of people. And the thesis will still be the same. So
100%. And you also wrote about, talked about the American dream. This is 1 Bitcoin. And I like that framing a lot, because we have this thing where we say, getting to a house, and like this, original American dream that we had. And now, especially for Gen Z, which we both are, we really want to get to a Bitcoin thing. Like, we want to save in Bitcoin. We want to be in Bitcoin, and not be like, oh, let's get to the house, or oh, let's get to this. And even if you want to get to a house and want to have the original American dream, you still can achieve that easier and better if you actually do it in Bitcoin, which is a funny thing for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm actually going to be speaking at a conference in Washington, D.C., the BTC and DC event, talking about 1 Bitcoin being the American dream, how the American dream has changed, right? How it is different from what the boomers wanted versus what the Gen Zers want, and then how we achieve those things. So, like you said, if you want to have the white picket fence, the new house, the new car, the wife and kids and the dog, and this like idealistic version of the American dream, Bitcoin is the fastest way to get there. And for most people, it's probably going to be the only way that you get there, right? Because digital assets are the way that Gen Z is going to own analog assets. So what I mean is, if you want to own that new house, if you want to own that new car, if you want to be able to support your family, maybe not have your wife work all day, so that someone can actually be there to raise your kids and not a stranger raising your kids, right? If you want to be able to sustain your income and do all these different things, Bitcoin would be a good avenue to do that, because your life gets cheaper as you save in Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is a way to supplement your income, especially as we continue to see fiat debasement take over the monetary policy of like the United States, right? Of every country, right? Every country is facing this great inflation, which means that the house is going up, the food is going up, the price of everything's going up, the price of the child care is going up, the medical care is going up. So how can we combat this, right? If you're working at your job, like I said, if you're in a sales role, sometimes you can scale your income very quickly. Not everybody is in sales, and not everyone in sales can actually do sales. So you might be in the warehouse like me. There's not enough hours in the day that you could work in order to keep up or to get ahead, because everything in this current system is designed to make sure that you're not actually thriving, right? The current system is just meant to feed on itself and to crush you into either a upper class or into a lower class. there is no middle class. The middle class continues to thin out. So if you're someone in that middle class, the only way that you can really establish yourself and get what you need to get done is by using a digital asset that is appreciating significantly faster than the rate of inflation. You're using that digital asset in order to acquire and maintain the analog lifestyle, the analog assets that you're chasing, right? So it's just really hard saving in fiat to get that down payment for a house. But if you're saving in Bitcoin for that down payment, you'll make it there a lot quicker.
And I think there's the situation where people aren't, like, this is such a cliche thing to say, but people aren't bullish enough. And what I mean by that is, you still have the opportunity. Like if you look at what the average wealth in the US is, I think it's about like 200,000, which for the average wealth, people can still buy like more than a Bitcoin. If you look at globally, it's a little less than that. It depends on where you go. So like this message is like really hard to make, but for most people, I would claim, especially for most people that are watching this, that live in the US, mostly live in Europe, live in the UK, Canada, and all those places, because this is kind of the like 90% of the audience here. You can still get to like 1 Bitcoin, and this is for me tremendously. And you just said before, like, oh, like everything under 100K is cheap. And I'm like, yeah, like now we are like everything under 1 million, like everything under 5 million is freaking cheap. And if you go forward like 10, 15, 20 years from now, and you will look back of like, oh, you could have had a Bitcoin and just like for 100K, like that was nothing. You could still achieve that. And this, I have to fear that people will wake up in like 2-3 years and everyone will complain of like, oh, I will never get to any substantial amount of Bitcoin. I mean, people are already complaining now, but in a few years it will be so much more. And I'm like, yeah, like, because you haven't sacrificed enough right now. Like you have to sacrifice a lot right now to actually get to your stack. And like 1 Bitcoin is tremendously a lot. Like you will have a lot even if you have under that. But the main message I want to say, like those people who don't go hard enough today will be the people that complain in 5 years of like, oh, like it's so expensive now.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I literally have a video on my channel talking about how, like you said, 1 Bitcoin is the new American dream. And eventually the new American dream will be 0.1 Bitcoin, then it'll be 0.01 Bitcoin. And it's because the needle's always moving downward, right? The Bitcoin's the only thing where the needle's moving backwards because the value is appreciating so much. You actually don't need all that Bitcoin. 5 years ago, the American dream was, 5 Bitcoins or something, right? Now you don't really need that many. Of course, we want as much as we can, but, again, you really don't need that many. The new American dream is now 1 Bitcoin, right? The next American dream is 0.1. And they probably won't even say that in 4 years. They're just going to say the new American dream is 1 million, or 10 million Satoshis, right? That's what they'll start saying. And it's because, again, the amount of value that 1 Bitcoin gets you continues to expand so greatly that you can encapsulate everything that you need just with that 1 unit of Bitcoin. So back in the day, you needed 1,000 Bitcoins just to buy a house. Then with 1,000 Bitcoins, 4 years later, 1,000 Bitcoins, you could buy multiple houses and the car. Then another 4 years after that, 1,000 Bitcoins. Now you're talking about buying the whole neighborhood, right? And that's now today with 1,000 Bitcoins. I mean, you really do whatever you want. And then that's going to continue to happen. It's going to continue to expand. So if we extrapolate that out, right, because you have a finite thing, when you have only 1 Bitcoin, people are going to think of you as, a legend, because you diamond handed all the way from 100,000 to, multi-million. But it's because you understood, why would I sell my finite thing for the infinite things, right? At the end of the day, for all intents and purposes, houses are infinite, cars are infinite, fiat is infinite, like actually, so it just doesn't really make sense for you to let go of the only thing in the universe that's finite. for something that can be printed or made very easily. And, of course, some people will say, well, when are you going to buy stuff? How are you going to buy stuff? It's going to get to a point where either one, you can sell such a small amount of Bitcoin for such a huge amount of fiat that it really doesn't matter. Or two, the world is going to transition onto a Bitcoin standard because it doesn't make sense to be using fake money anymore. We can just use real money at that point. People are literally going to be selling their houses for 0.05 Bitcoin. They're going to be begging you 5 million Satoshis for a 2,000 square foot house, you know, and it's going to be like how the boomers today are deciding, I'm not giving up my house unless I'm selling it for $600,000 or whatever it is. And it's not even that big of a house and the area is not that good. That's just the way that real estate has inflated, in terms of inflation, right? You know, the values and then the valuations are way through the roof, and they're not budging on those prices, right? The market's not budging on those prices. There's a lot of people who are hoping for a market crash so that way they can afford a house. The crash is not coming, right? If it does crash, it's crashing to the upside, right? Because the currency is being devalued. So if those guys want to sell their house for high, or they want to sell their houses to BlackRock, it's all good. They're going to have to sell their house to me for a very small amount of Bitcoin. It'll be a lot, but it'll be small to me, because I've been stacking for so long. So $600,000 house, going to be a 600,000 Satoshi house. And you can buy 600,000 sats for like $800 right now. So it'll be cheap for me, expensive for them.
It's super interesting because I think especially for Gen Z, and I love that you really go down like the GenZBTC route. It means so much Bitcoin, because if you think about millennials, they're already talking about how they cannot afford houses and all that things. For Gen Zs, it's like 4x worse. it's like way worse if they don't have Bitcoin. So maybe we can talk a little bit about like what Bitcoin actually means for Gen Z. A lot of people say like, oh, like the millennials, like this is the main thing. But I'm like, actually, like maybe I'm biased because I'm Gen Z, but I'm actually thinking like for Gen Z, Bitcoin is the main, like that's the main Bitcoin generation. That will be the generation that will wake up in a world that is Bitcoin. For Gen Z, they are now 27 years old. The oldest, I think, 28, to what down like 18, 17. I don't know exactly where the borders are. But basically, since they interact with money, they always had Bitcoin as an option, which is fascinating to see. So what do you think is the meaning of Bitcoin towards Gen Z?
Like I said, you know, Bitcoin is that digital asset that lets us hold our analog assets. But more importantly, right, Bitcoin is hope. Bitcoin is hope. And that's for all generations, but especially the younger ones, right? Because even though millennials have it bad, you could argue Gen Zers have it worse. And then you could argue that the Gen Alpha that comes after us, they have it even worse. And then the people who aren't even born yet, they have it even worse. And it's because inflation is this compounding invisible effect that keeps getting worse. When people say, well, inflation's only 2%, it's only 3%. Yeah, it's 3% plus every other year before that. So naturally, every generation that shows up to deal with that new inflation always has it worse. It's always been worse. Millennials have it worse than the Gen Xers. The Gen Xers have it worse than the boomers. Right? So it's this compounding cascade of debt. It's this cascade of money printing, and you have to fight back harder and harder against it every single day. And people are understanding that this is not normal. This doesn't feel right. It's not fair. It's not whatever. And some people fight back by just complaining on Twitter all day. Some people fight back by thinking, oh, we need to go eat the rich. Some people fight back by saying that it's the government who's doing this. Some people fight back by saying it's immigrants, and they just say whatever they say that their space, their bubble has told them to say. But at the end of the day, it's just your currency is losing value, and every other downstream effect, every other bad thing in the world really can be chalked up to fake money, right? That's why there's so many great books like, Fiat Ruins Everything. And once you start looking into what fiat is, you really do realize it does ruin everything. So that puts you in a position where you feel really hopeless. You feel like the system's too big to ever fail. You can't get out. And you're just waiting for some miracle. And that's what turns you into a gambler. You start playing the Powerball. You want to win the lottery. You want to do this and that. You start trying to do immoral things just to get a little bit of money to try to scrape by, just for the opportunity to escape the rat race. But Bitcoin is that hope for the future that pretty much guarantees your way out of the current system. And it guarantees your way out of fiat land, out of inflation land, because Bitcoin is designed mathematically to go up forever as long as money is being printed. If they stop printing money, then yeah, Bitcoin's price could stagnate. But guess what? They have to keep printing money. Otherwise, their entire system crumbles, collapses, and goes to zero. So as long as they keep printing money, as long as inflation keeps going, because we live in a debt-based system, we live in an inflationary monetary system. By design, Bitcoin's going to go up forever, and it's going to go up faster than the rate of inflation. So you're going to be getting richer forever. All right. As soon as we get off of a fiat standard, as soon as we get off of an inflationary standard, what other standard are they going to go to? They're going to go to a Bitcoin standard. So Bitcoin is hope for the future. Bitcoin is your way out of the matrix, so to speak. And for all the people who think that that's still gibberish, or it's just hope, it's just cope, it's just dreams, it's just fantasy, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But it's happening every single day right in front of you. You just have to be willing to look.
Are you subscribing at all to the fourth turning theory that we are at the end of the fourth turning and we are kind of like before it really gets better, we have to get through a few years where it gets a lot worse before like the new standard kind of rises with maybe Bitcoin and like I think Bitcoin, but like the fourth turning is more general?
Yeah, no, I actually do think so. And the only thing is, I think it's happening way slower than people think. Like some people might think, oh, we're at the end of the fourth turning or whatever. Again, I don't exactly know the timeline of some of these cycles, but what I would say is anything that you think is going to happen, whether it's some sort of civil uprising or some sort of global great reset, whether that's a monetary reset, whether that's a war of some kind or whatever you think is going to go on, we are pretty far away from that. And by pretty far, I mean literally over a decade, bare minimum, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on in the UK, right? Where people are pushing back against open borders and all this different stuff. And there's a lot of stuff in the US where people are saying, oh, well, I don't like those people on that side and we can't live with the people on this side. It's just a bunch of chatter, right? It's just a bunch of talk on Twitter. At the end of the day, these great cycles, these great turnings, these great revolutions, right? Monetary transitions from one currency as a reserve asset to another currency as a reserve. Ray Dalio talks about a lot of these great cycles, right? These boom and bust cycles, the transitions of power. These things don't happen in short order. Even though you see them online, you're seeing it on the news, they're talking about it. These things take multiple decades, and even where we're at right now, right? I would say maybe 10 to 15 years, we see some actual substantial transitions and changes in power, changes in what currency is accepted worldwide, right? What currency is the standard, right? So I would say 10 to 15 years from now, we'll see a great change in that. We'll see a great change in policy. We'll see a great change in people's attitudes, how they feel about certain things, how the world looks, right? We'll truly be towards the end of the fourth turning 10 to 15 years from now. But don't expect things to happen too quickly, right? These great transitions take a really long time. People are really slow as a whole, right? As a mass, people are really slow to make changes like that. To shake up the world order, to shake up the status quo, because people don't like change. So they'll do a lot to fight against it. So things will stay the same for longer than you might think. But that means that you have more time to do what you have to do to prepare. You have more time to stack. You have more time to educate yourself. You have more time to get ready, right? And that's not just about Bitcoin and money. That's about everything. So again, it's going to be a little bit slower than people think, but maybe a decade and a half, will be right around where people think we're going in about 2 years, right? It's not going to happen in 2 years. It's going to take about 15 years. So
I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC-free Bitcoin. That's why I use simplemining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I love that because I truly think the network effects of the current thing, whatever this is, always takes longer to really get through and innovate that with the new thing than people think. And there's two things, like no matter if it's with Bitcoin or like the internet or like with cars and horses, like the new thing, people always underestimate how huge the change will be, but they overestimate how quick things will move. And this is something consistently I see over and over and over again, also with Bitcoin. People completely underestimate how huge of a shift Bitcoin actually is, and how fundamental we actually change everything because we change our money. But then at the same time, they also overestimate how quick we'll get there. And it's like, it takes some time, and we are kind of this aircraft carrier that slowly moves and gets bigger and bigger. At some point, it's the whole ocean, but it moves slow. Like it's not, you cannot change the money within like 16 years. Like you need a very long time. People have to get educated. We have to build out the ecosystem. It's not just Bitcoin protocol. It's all the apps, the services, everything connected. Like we have we have so many things to build out before we really get to this end point. And there's a long ways to there. And it's fascinating how people say like, oh, yeah, fiat will completely fall apart in 2 years. I'm like, first of all, I hope not, because this brings a lot of bad things with it that I don't want to happen. And second of all, I don't think it will happen. It shouldn't happen. And I don't know if we're even ready for something like that. So like, I love that point that you brought up with like, it takes some time. And I also think it's a good thing that it takes time. It gives us time to prepare and build out things.
Yeah, and again, I think you had a great quote right there. People underestimate the impact and they overestimate the speed of adoption. Again, there will be a gradually, then a suddenly moment. But again, I would say give us double the amount of time because Bitcoin's existed, like you said, around 16 years. I would say maybe after 32 years, right? Another 16 years from now, Bitcoin actually will be the dominant network, right? Like the market cap will be unbelievably insane. And then we're going to be close to the point where we're no longer denominating it in dollars. But again, it's going to take about twice the amount of time that Bitcoin's already existed. It's done a lot in just 16 years. It's done a lot, but we're going to need another 16 to get to where most people think that we're headed. So again, it's not too long, but it's also not too short of a time. That's right there in that sweet spot. So after about 30 years total, Bitcoin will be the dominant network, just based on the pace that it's taking, right? Because the internet around this size, this was like the internet in like the late 90s, right? Mid to late 90s. So if you were to take the internet from, 1995 and then move forward to like 2010, the internet was way bigger by that time, right? It was super mainstream at that point. So I feel like that's where we are right now. We're in 1995 for Bitcoin.
And it's a good point because, I think the main problem is that people cannot see what they cannot imagine. And, sorry, the other way around. They cannot imagine what they cannot see. With the internet, in 1995, what did you had? Like, I think Amazon started around that time. So like you had very small things, but also only a few people actually saw that. You had some messaging things going on maybe, but very different. And then, could you have imagined what right now ChatGPT is bringing to us every day? Of like, imagine you being in 1995 and someone tells you, oh yeah, like in 30 years, you will be speaking to the computer and he will be doing everything for you and you can literally look up everything. Which sounds so normal. Like it doesn't sound like innovation when I say it out loud now, but it is huge for anyone in this time. And I think a big point of that is look at movies, how they imagined large language models. Like when we look at Knight Rider, or when we look at so many different things where, like Iron Man. I don't know if you've watched Iron Man, which with the assistant, and there's many other. I think in Star Trek there was also something. I've never watched it, but someone mentioned it to me that there's always like language models were in the movies like way before, and that's how we imagine it, and we are now freaking living in in that future. So it's kind of wild for me to think about, okay, what is actually possible long term.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And then speaking of like the AI agent thing, I got my first iPhone. I was a really big Android guy. Of course, I got the Bitcoin iPhone, right? The Bitcoin one. And it's really cool. And I love the Apple Intelligence thing because sometimes I'll be looking at something or I'll have a question about something and you can literally take a picture of it and you can just talk into the phone saying like, hey, what is this? Also, where can I buy another thing like this, but cheaper, right? What is this made out of? Is this something that can actually fit inside of this, right? And it's just super cool. It's super cool. And that's going to continue to become cheaper and cheaper and more accessible for everyone. It's going to get bigger and bigger, right? And again, it's going to be just like Bitcoin. These AI agents are going to be transacting with each other using Bitcoin. And I think you actually had it right the first time when you said people cannot see what they can't imagine, right? They literally cannot imagine some of the things that haven't been invented yet. So yeah, they can't see it. They literally cannot see what they can't imagine. Someone else is going to imagine it first, and then they're going to build it. Then that person who could not even think of that, they couldn't even conceive that, then they'll see it, and then it'll be obvious. But there's so many things that are being built on Bitcoin, that are being built and integrated into Bitcoin, that we think are cool today, but we won't even be able to imagine some of the things that we're able to do in the future, right? Right now, they're completely invisible to us. And that's when some sort of great inventor or some great thinker, some visionary is going to create their product. And then it's going to be amazing, right? It's going to be something that we feel like, oh, we can't live without this. And that's what the people at River are doing. That's what the people at Strategy are trying to do. That's what the people at Swan are trying to do. That's what Jack Mallers at Strike is trying to do. We're all trying to make things that no one else can even imagine at the moment.
What do you think is the other things that Bitcoiners are getting wrong about the Bitcoin future? Like what is kind of like what you're seeing is discussed a lot and might be where you think like, I'm not sure if it turns out that way.
It's really hard to say, because Bitcoiners tend to be right about everything, right? It just takes time, it just takes time. And again, I think the major thing is just the amount of time it's going to take. A lot of people are a little bit antsy. They just want to see Bitcoin win. We all want to see Bitcoin win. It just doesn't happen as quick as we think. So we just got to stay patient, stay consistent, stay grinding, and stay vigilant, right? There's always going to be different types of attacks that come our way, whether it's developers being paid off to do certain things, or devs going rogue, or governments trying to co-opt Bitcoin, acting like, oh no, it's okay. You can just put all your money into an ETF. It's going to be totally fine. You don't need your own keys. It's actually safer if we hold them. Just there's so many different attack vectors. There's going to be FUD. There's going to be bots FUDding us. There's going to be AI generated clips of Michael Saylor and AI generated clips of all these different Bitcoin OGs that are essentially saying this or that, and they never actually said it. So just stay vigilant, think for yourself, and just be a Bitcoiner, right? At the end of the day, just be a Bitcoiner. We'll probably be A-okay. Just takes time.
I want to talk about that because the Bitcoin community, there are two main things that I'm currently very interested in the Bitcoin community, just like observing what they are talking about. The first thing is the low sentiment, where we are up, I don't know, 70%, 100%, like depending on like, I actually don't know. Like, I think the last time I checked, it was 100%, but it could be lower now. We are up, 72% the last 12 months. And it is interesting for me how it feels like we are in a bear market. Like we are up 72% in the past year. If we continue 72% each year, that would be freaking awesome. Like that would be a freaking home run. But I don't think I think 72, if we make in 12 months, is actually overperforming what Bitcoin actually will do. And I'm as bullish as it gets. But still we have a huge uptrend and people are bearish. It seems like the sentiment is very low. How do you look at that? Like, or like, are you also surprised that like people are not like more euphoric? Is it that retail just isn't here yet?
Yeah, no, retail is not here. Retail's gone. Retail might not be coming back, right? Because again, the blow off tops is what drags retail in. That's what gets them so excited about Bitcoin. And the days of blow off tops might be over. I don't think so. right? I don't think so. I think it's just been a while since it's happened. And because of, law of large numbers, it's a lot easier to go from 1 to 100 than it is to go from 100,000 to 1 million, right? There's a lot of space in between 100,000 and 1 million. So it's harder to move that needle. But those blow off tops, those crazy runs, I remember back in like the early days, 2019, we were seeing those crazy double digit days, double digit green days, double digit red days. Those days are pretty much gone, right? And it's hard to make people care, especially when it's not as exciting, right? It's not the most interesting thing in the world anymore. Well, Bitcoin is still the most interesting thing in the world, but when it comes to the volatility, the percentage moves, right? That's not the most interesting thing anymore. So unless that comes back, retail probably is not coming back, even though they're the ones who need to be here right now because Wall Street's here, the ETFs are here, the banks are here, the countries are here. They know what's going on because they're thinking long term and they're accumulating. So there's that. And then when it comes to the price action, people being bearish, it's because typically, we have all these different memes, October is coming up. We have, typically green months going into Q4 of a, after a halving year, this is typically where we get those massive run ups and they're trying to base the future performance of Bitcoin off the past performance. And it's just not excelling the way that the past performance was. So that's why people are just kind of bored. They're getting rocked to sleep. And if we are being honest, Bitcoin has been between 80,000 and 120,000 for, like you said, maybe like the better part of a year now. Right. So it is almost like that flat market. Again, it's not flat. It's flat in Bitcoin terms. It is flat in Bitcoin terms. And that's just boring to people. But the people who are actually educating, who understand what Bitcoin is, who see the bigger picture, we're all still here. We're all saying the same stuff. We're still stacking every single day. So it's just not as crazy as it was before. And because of that, people aren't as enthusiastic. They just don't care as much as they used to. The hype isn't really around. And the newbies, all of the retailers, the retail guys are not around either for those reasons.
Crazy. And I very much agree with that. It's just crazy for me because I lived through 2021 and knew how hyped up everything felt. And it wasn't as crazy, like if you look like what's happening now with like presidents talking about it, institutions talking about like it seems like there's so much going on. And it's like, who said it? I think Nico from Simple Bitcoin said it once. It's the best cycle for news for Bitcoin and it's the worst cycle for price.
No, 100%. And again, like, people just find that stuff boring, oh, well, BlackRock said this about Bitcoin. It's like, who is that? I don't know what that is. A bunch of people just don't, you know what I mean? In order to get the newbies in on this, what we need? We need like Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift shows a Bitcoin purse. Now all of a sudden price action 1 million, all of a sudden. So I don't know, man. I don't know.
I agree. We need Taylor Swift. I think we had, was it Katy Perry last time? Or no, Paris Hilton? Like it's like people with like the Bitcoin classes, which were popular, I think, last time. One other thing that I want to touch on you, touch with you on, is Knots versus Core. I'm not sure how deep you're into that. It's just for me as a commentator, super interesting how emotional the whole debate is. So I want to make sure to touch on it and maybe take on it in because you touched before on like rogue developers and like having kind of discussions within the community. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. And some people in my comment section saying you need to make a video about this, and just being honest, I know I'm not very technically versed. So it's really hard for me to speak on this, because I don't want to we dunk on people a lot in the Bitcoin network. We need to keep doing that. But usually when you say something really stupid, it's because you're talking about something that you don't know anything about. And then someone else who's a little bit smarter than you is going to dunk on you either immediately or later down the road. But with that being said, I do like to witness the commentary. I like to read as much as I can, especially on X, of people going back and forth. And as I currently understand it. It's just not a good look for the core developers. It's not a good look. Maybe technically they are correct about certain things, but first off, the look that they're showing is just not good, right? It's this authoritarian fiat style, trust me, bro. You're not supposed to be making these decisions on your own. It's up to me to do the work for you. I need to hold your hand because you don't know what you're doing. You're stupid. And even if you do disagree and you want us to explain it, we're not going to. We're just going to go ahead and do it, right? That's not a good look. The second thing is that at the end of the day, right, some people are just saying, well, the filters don't work. The filters don't work. The filters suck. I mean, just leave them there. What's the problem with them just staying? Right. There's just all these different issues where, again, we don't want to change Bitcoin. It's very rare that we ever do any sort of change to Bitcoin. And it just doesn't make sense to me. A lot of it doesn't make sense. A lot of the back and forth that I read, they end up just not making sense. And it's not even from a technical standpoint. Of course, technically, some of the stuff does not make sense to me because I literally don't get it. But just from like a virtue standpoint, from a, I guess extrapolating out as an attack vector, right? It's just not a good look. So I've been running knots on my computer for a long time because Core didn't work for me. I tried downloading like Core 26 or something like that. It didn't work for me. And I just downloaded knots, right? And then after seeing all this different stuff, I set my filters a certain way, just because, I don't want to be relaying the spam. I want to try to stop spam as best I can. So some people will watch this and they say, well, the spam filters don't actually work. You're not stopping anything. Well, I mean, what are we going to do? We got to at least try. So I think one way to try to put it would be in school, they try putting filters on computers. So that way you're not like kids, like, elementary school kids aren't looking at certain things. They're not on websites they shouldn't be on, or they're not goofing off in school. The filters are very minimal, right? They're pretty easy to circumvent. So you could say that the filters don't actually work, but it's the whole point of trying, right? Well, we don't want to just have all the bad websites as easily available as you can make them, right? We don't want kids just playing Minecraft all day on the computer. We want to try to at least block it in some way. We want to at least try, you're at least trying. It seems like the opposite of that is not trying at all. I feel like that's not the stance you should take, especially when, again, you're doing certain things that have already been done on Bitcoin Satoshi's vision. And then that turned out pretty bad, right? Opening up the op return limit to like the maximum so that people can put videos and all this other stuff. It just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't seem like something that should be done. And again, if the filters don't work at all, what's the harm in them staying? What's the harm in them staying? Yeah, they don't work. Okay, well, Bitcoin still works. Bitcoin still works. So I don't know. That's my whole thing. And when people ask that on Twitter and they go back and forth, it turns into like this crazy argument that ends up. And I'm not trying to be biased or anything, but from what I've seen, it ends up turning into most of the core guys. The core guys end up being really quiet on the other end when they get pushed back and challenged in these ways. But there's a lot of smart people on the core side, from what I can tell. I know that Pierre Richard was talking about something about this, and he seems like he's leaning more towards the side of core. And I've seen some of his arguments go back and forth with people. And again, he's a really thoughtful guy. Some of the things that he says make a lot of sense. And again, it's just hard. There's a lot of legends on both sides, a lot of Bitcoin OGs on both sides who are like battling it out right now. And at the end of the day, just got to think for yourself. Got to keep on learning. It's hard to make any decisions right now, but I'm leaning towards the knots side. I got to say, that's just me personally, just based on what I've seen.
I love that. And, I'm just surprised by how emotional it is. Because when I talk with people that are really, technical into this, they say there's a lot of worse things that, Core did way before op return, and op return shouldn't be that big of a deal. And it kind of shows also how far we're already in the Bitcoin story, where 5-6 years ago, we talked about consensus changes, where we talked about, oh, we need to change the block size. Now we are talking about a policy change, which is a way smaller part, a way less critical part of Bitcoin. And it kind of just shows how Bitcoin matures also of like how it is working. And I think it's actually a positive thing. I'm already looking forward to what are we discussing in 5 years? what small thing will be like the major thing? But I probably think that it will be even smaller and even smaller nitty gritty thing than that we have right now. And I don't want to downplay the whole debate, but I think it's blown up more than it should have, just because of like emotional argumentations. But yeah, with that being said, we have one question that I asked each and every one of my returning guests, and you are already, I think, the third time now on the show, if I remember correctly. It's really, really fun to have you now the third time on the show. And the question is, what have you learned outside of Bitcoin since your last recording?
What I've learned outside of Bitcoin since the last recording is the importance of being the Bitcoin guy and just emphasizing Bitcoin as much as you can, like kind of taking that and running with it, right? And it doesn't have to just be the Bitcoin guy. It's just whatever your nature is, right? Whatever your personality is, whatever your passions are, you really have to accept that and then run with it, right? So there's just certain things that we know for a fact that we are good at, that we love doing, that we could do for free for the rest of our life, that we feel like we have to share with people. Those are the things that you need to really double down on, hone in on, understand about yourself, and then full send it, right? Really go for it as best you can. And me doing that has landed me in so many good positions, right? Being the Bitcoin guy, being the guy who's really into technology, has landed me in so many good positions, helped me close so many great deals. Again, Hut 8, multi-billion-dollar company, all because I called some people, talked about how I was an investor in their company, how I love Bitcoin, how I think that it's amazing that they're securing the network, and that I would love the opportunity just to work for them. Now I know like over 20 people who work for Hut 8, never met them in person. But I talked to them on the phone. I got their contact info. We go back and forth, and I move these multi-million-dollar shipments. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't double down on myself and double down on the Bitcoin network, the Bitcoin ideology, right? I have my little Bitcoin mouse pad at work. They literally know me as Mr. Bitcoin, right? Because people in the office didn't even know, well, you could do freight for Bitcoin. I thought it was digital, right? Then you show them what a mining rig looks like. Then you show them what an entire mining farm looks like. Then you told them about how mining infrastructure actually helps stabilize the grid and how it helps expand out clean energy usage, right? And then you are basically orange pilling people passively. You are passively orange pilling people by doubling down on who you are. And it doesn't have to be Bitcoin. Like I said, if you really think yoga is the best thing in the world and everyone needs to be doing it, you need to double down as the yoga person. You need to subtly integrate yoga into all the stuff that you do, right? Whether that's wearing like a yoga hat or like a yoga shirt or something, or posting online talking about your yoga journey. Hey, I'm going to yoga again, right? Whatever it is, you need to really integrate that into your everyday and then keep going. And then once you keep going, I mean, your life's just going to be a lot more fruitful. Your ability to enjoy your life will just be a lot better. So that's what I would say. I would just say, figure out what your nature is and then follow that, right? Some people's nature, you're an entrepreneur, you want to start your own business. Some people's nature is to be a seller, right? You can sell very well. Some people's nature is to be physical, right? Whether that's being a bodybuilder, whether that's being a fitness instructor, whatever it is, their nature is to be an educator, right? So find your nature and then fully chase it as hard as you can. And then all the riches, all of the fame, all of the glory, all of the happiness will follow from that.
This is a freaking awesome advice. So thank you so much for that. I hope so. Maybe one or two people get some inspiration from that, because I think it's a very nice thing. Yeah, we have an end routine also, as you know, where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question: do you think eCash, so like Cashew on Fediment, will be the banking layer of Bitcoin?
Now, I have seen a little bit of eCash usage. I know that they have a widget in Apple now. I think eCash, you can just send Bitcoin directly to someone through text now by using eCash. I could be wrong on that, but I saw a video of someone doing something similar in their iPhone text messaging. And again, Fediments, I've heard about Fediments as well, these different federations that you can make with other Bitcoins and Bitcoin nodes. So it's really hard for me to speak on this because, again, I'm just not as educated on the topic. But I think that if it's not eCash, if it's not Cashew, if it's not Fediments, if it's not Lightning, it'll be something else. It's something that no one has invented yet. Right. And that's what we talked about earlier. People cannot see what they can't imagine. I really cannot imagine a world where we're still using fiat banking rails 16 years from now. The difference will be that Bitcoin rails will be integrated into the fiat system if the fiat system is still around, right? Even fiat will be running on Lightning, right? Robinhood will be running on Lightning, all these different services that used to be 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, are now going to be 24/7, 365. And it was systems like Bitcoin that allowed that to be possible. We're already seeing that type of transition happen. So I think the monetary network, like the Bitcoin network, the banking network, is also going to become integrated. They're going to become intertwined in that way, right? Because there's going to be banks that are custodying your Bitcoin. There's going to be apps that are custodying your Bitcoin. There's going to be companies that are custodying your Bitcoin. It's going to be you custodying your Bitcoin, right? It's just going to be so many different options that are available, right? So I can't sit here and say, one thing I do know for sure, if we're being honest, one thing I know for sure is that it won't just be Fediments. It will not just be eCash. It won't just be Cashew. It won't just be Blockstream. It'll be so many different options. And there'll be options that we can't even think of right now, that we've never even thought of, that will be available to us as well. That's how the world's going to be. That's the way that we're going. I don't think it'll just be one singular thing that'll be like the new wave. The only thing that's like that is Bitcoin itself, right? But the way that we access Bitcoin, the way that we hold Bitcoin, the way that we use Bitcoin, the way that we send and receive Bitcoin, those things are going to have hundreds of options. There's going to be an insane amount of optionality because there's always going to be more entrepreneurs that want to build on this open source software. They want to provide services for people. They obviously want to get paid for these services that they're providing. And they also want to try to beat the other guy. They want to make a better thing than the other guy. They want to make a faster thing than the other guy. So that's where I think the future of like payments on Bitcoin, the future of payments with Bitcoin, I think that's where we're going.
I love it. I'm very much agreed with that. And yeah, it is the main thing. Like people don't even use it right now a lot to pay for things, and we already have so many solutions. Imagine how many solutions we will have, and how many great solutions we will have when people really start spending their Bitcoin in a massive way. But yeah, thank you so much, man, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you and ask you questions?
You can find me at GenZBTC. That's GenZBTC on X, on YouTube, on Nostr, which again, I don't use as much as I should, but I am on Nostr, so you can find me there. And I'm just looking forward to talking with more people, getting my name out there more. I haven't been uploading as much as I should recently, but it's hard when you work in an industry like mine. Logistics is 24/7, which is why I'm up at 2 a.m. to talk to Robin Seyr, and then going to work at basically 4 a.m. to go talk to someone who's on the East Coast. Then I got to talk to someone in California a little bit later. They got to send something all the way out to Paraguay or something like that. Hey, it's all good. Let's do an air shipment. I gotcha. And then it's just a lot, it's hard. But we get it done regardless. So, thank you guys so much. Thank you for having me, Mr. Robin. I'll be back again. But who knows when it'll be, but it'll be another good time.
I love you, man, and thank you so much for being on the podcast, and especially thank you so much for putting so much work into Bitcoin and providing for Bitcoin. And this amazing thing. Maybe the last thing that I will say today is like, you working so hard to earn more Bitcoin is benefiting every Bitcoiner. So basically, Bitcoin is working hard to get more Bitcoin. Is basically we are all working hard for each other, and I think this is maybe a great ending point today. So thank you so much, GenZBTC, for doing that, and also thank you so much for being on again, and also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye bye.
Yep. Hey, and listen, every job is a Bitcoin job if you save in Bitcoin.
Yes.
See ya.
This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.